I'd like to introduce David. David Lilley. Some of you might have seen him before, and if not, you might have come across his material. David has been around the block for many, many, many years. For over 50 years.
So homeopathic,
Yes. And is also the Dean of Faculty of Homeopathy in South Africa between 1994 and 2012, where he really tried to bridge the gap, or did bridge the gap actually, in South Africa between homeopathy and the medical convention. So some really great work is done there. David is also an osteopath, and these days he has dedicated his time to writing and to having a select practice.
Thank you very much, and it's lovely to be back. I'm not used to one of these, so please forgive me if I gesticulate as I normally do and move around, so it may wander away from my mouth and you might not hear me so well. Can you hear me quite well at the back there? But much better with that? Yeah. Okay, so I'll try and remember. Well, with the wolf coming out, I'm being asked, thank you so much again for the invitation of coming to speak to you. What subject should I speak on? And it seemed just quite natural, since I'm giving a seminar on Monday and Tuesday on the wolf, to deal with its sibling, the dog. And the important factor with the dog is that we learn so much about the wolf from the dog. The dog has had so much intimate relationships with humans that we can add on a lot of dog qualities to the wolf. We're dealing with either the wolf or the dog with immensely important archetypal energy. I do hope that in your medical practice, in your thinking of the materia medica, that you have a hierarchy. That you do not see that all remedies are equal in stature and status. Because, believe me, they are not. There are some that are more equal than others. There are those that stand out above all others. And if we had to think of a remedy that embraces the materia medica, that stands right at the top, an overshadowing, overspreading, like a beautiful banyan tree, which I spoke of last time I was with you, when we were speaking about Yggdrasil, in other words, the great cosmic tree, the world axis, and what tree would we think of that would carry that beautiful power? And my natural instinct as a young man would have been the oak tree. But by investigation, as I dealt with last time, we find that the remedy that carries the picture of that high status of tree, the all-loving tree, has to be an evergreen in the first place, and it is the banyan. Now, a remedy that has that kind of scope is one that will stand out as being right at the top of the hierarchy. So, put the banyan there, certainly. But we don't know all that much about the banyan, and we don't use it all that frequently. We should use it more frequently. But a remedy that swings from left to right and left to right, back and forth, demonstrating to us, I cover everything. And what is that remedy? And it must come from the breast, the mother principle, the great mother goddess. I see very well presented here, I must say. The masculine energy here is low, which is always good. And looking out of the window, it's beautifully present out there as well. Carcinosin is the one that stands right at the top. The remedy that loves nature, that loves dance, that loves beauty, that loves everything that is exquisite, that has that refinement, that special something that is eternally wonderful and embracing. That is carcinosin. And see it in that light. Now, when you know that Lac-can also moves from left to right, as most of the lac remedies do, but not as much as lac-can, obviously, and not so much as lac-lupinum. Now, who started tail wagging? And why did we tail wag? And why do we still tail wag? I want to have a good look at that with you, so we can understand what it really means. It's certainly connected to this left-right scope of these two magnificent remedies. It must have great meaning. It started with the wolf, not with the dog. There was a common ancestor to both wolf and dog, from which wolf and dog split away some 40,000 years ago. That's a long, long time ago. In other words, they are sister species, not mother and child, as was originally thought. These two species are sister species, both springing away from the original wolf line. The line that had split off even before that, it went off back to the sea to become a dolphin, was even further back. So we have dolphins splitting away, we have dog and wolf, grey wolf, timber wolf, splitting off pretty well at the same time, some 40,000 years ago. We had just arrived in Europe at that 45,000 years ago. Out of Africa we came, Homo erectus, and gradually evolving Homo heidelbergensis, and eventually Cro-Magnon, and then Homo sapiens. And by 45,000 years ago, we had arrived also. And the wolves that we consorted with were pretty formidable wolves. But the dog split away and became intimately involved with us. And mythology took the dog and brought it into its mythical stories. And one must always know that a myth is a dream. A myth is a universal dream that we all dream, our fairy stories. And we people this very often with animals. And we give those animals anthropomorphic meaning. In other words, they have human characteristics that we know well. If I have to say that's a foxy individual, you know precisely what I mean. When we give a lady a wolf whistle, we know precisely what our objective is. And the man behind the whistle is most certainly a wolf. That I'll be discussing on Monday and Tuesday. So we'll depart from the wolf and get back to the dog. So, the dreams that we have personally at night, these are myths also, but they're personal myths. Both the universal collective myth and the personal myth come from the collective unconscious. And the collective unconscious contains all that has been, all that is, and all that ever will be. It's everything. It's everything. I'll speak about that also later. We dip into that with our homeopathic remedies when we are practicing with our patient. We enter in, we give an archetypal energy, aurum, and that aurum has an archetypal energy that plumbs the depths of the collective unconscious. It brings about resonance, reverberation, response. And onto the surface arises the archetype, the grand archetype of aurum. And we know that that is so many things, because aurum is the sun, sol is part of that. And here again, I come back quickly to hierarchy. Have a hierarchy. When you're giving some little, remote, exotic remedy, do not think that you're striking the soul's structure at any great depth. It is merely on a superficial picture that you've recognized, and quite accurately you give the remedy. If you are doing so with accuracy, as simple as the picture that has been presented to you, as pure as it possibly can be, you will get response. And out of the woodwork, something will come. You're shaking the apple tree, apples will drop. Those then you garner, and you bring them into your basket as a greater totality of symptoms. But once you've got things moving, you're looking at dreams. You're looking at what that simple remote remedy, low in the hierarchy, because it was indicated, has brought out onto the surface. Believe me, it is merely a marker for something far grander that stands behind it. These are the foothills of the practice that you're using. The great mountains stand behind. Just as when Kent told us that belladonna was the acute of sulfur, and when we see aconite is the acute of sulfur, and belladonna is the acute of calcium carbonate, and ferrum phos is the acute of lycopodium. These are the grand remedies that stand behind. So also with subacute remedies, if I can term them such, remedies that are for the more superficial layers of the psyche. Behind them stand greater remedies. And these are the great remedies like gold. Gold is soul, but it is also the eye of God, Zeus. It is also his radiant son, Phoebus Apollo. He of the golden bow and golden arrows. We need to know what the Greeks saw in Apollo, how they pictured him to understand Aurum in its fullest beauty. And we need to go almost to Delphi to understand this and to feel it. I've done that. To go there and to feel the energy of gold. Apollo had his shrine there. And above his shrines stood, know thyself. And that must be one of the first things that a homeopath has to do. Because how can we hope to know that person who is sitting opposite us across the desk if we don't know ourselves? And we've got to know how we stand in the hierarchy of human beings. At soul, self, spiritual level, all equal. At ego, self level, desperately, disparatively different, aren't we? In so many ways. Often abject ways, as we'll see with Lac-can. Gold, take it further. What is gold? Where does it come from? It comes from Africa. Africa is gold. What is the animal, the king of the African continent? It's the lion. The lion is gold, Aurum. Link all these. They are archetypally one. And you broaden your understanding of Aurum. If you want to understand Aurum, have a look at the Leonine type, the person born under the star sign of Leo. You'll learn much from that also. So we have a hierarchy, and there are great remedies and there are lesser remedies. And we are today dealing with, seriously, a great remedy. So, coming back to Greek mythology, because we can learn so much. Who was accompanied always by dogs? Do you know? Okay. My hearing is bad, but does anyone know who is accompanied by dogs? Hades. Yes, Hades is. But there's somebody more important down there than Hades. You're in the right area.
Artemis.
See, Hades is guarded. I didn't hear, so I can't laugh with you. But Hades, that gentleman down there, he had a three-headed dog at the entrance to Hades. But it wasn't his dog. The hellhounds belong to someone else. And it's that person we're interested in. And that is Hecate. Hecate. All right? Goddess of the underworld. When we know that the dog has what they call phonic significance. In other words, we're dealing with the deep unconscious. Hecate, that goddess, who is she? She's goddess of the moon, which brings me back to Wolf on Monday. She's goddess of the moon. The moon is a triple goddess. In Ireland is Bridget, isn't it? Yeah. Bridget, the triple goddess. That triple goddess is always made up of three personages. The maiden, the mother, and the crone. And the crone is Hecate. She is extremely important. What is her task? Her task is to act as an escort. She conducts the soul into the next life. She crosses boundaries, different dimensions. She is the goddess of the crossroads. And we're always, all of us, at a crossroad of decision. The decision primarily is, when am I going to start gaining sovereignty of my psyche? When am I going to make a positive step towards gaining sovereignty, dominion over myself? That's a dilemma, because you have to set aside fear, you have to set aside hate, you have to set aside so many things which plague this remedy that we're going to be dealing with. Hecate is that force, an energy field that we can give, personify it, which is linked to the dog and indicates to us that the dog as a guide dog for the blind. And how blind are we in taking the case history of a patient? Hugely, aren't we? Know thyself. We don't know ourselves, and I have to know thee. How can I know thee without knowing myself? So, a most important process in this healing of the sick is to begin with yourself, and to bring about changes in yourself that will reveal far more to you about the person that you're healing. Hecate is the energy that can help you. Lac-can can help you. The wolf can help you. We look wherever we can for those archetypes which are particularly associated with being a guide or a conductor, or the one who ushers you from one dimension to another. The raven is another. It was well known in Ireland. Ask the Morrigan. The raven is a very important archetype. So you can send the Lac-can in, as you can with carcinosin, and invariably, even if you are in doubt, you will get a response of some sort. It is so wide in its effect. The dog, if you came from outer space and you had an array of dogs, you would be not incorrect to think almost that they were from different species or in fact from different genuses. Would you not? They don't look as if they originated from the same origin. Now, in that picture, so much is contained, because at the top we have what the dog is, what the dog was, what the dog should be. And at the bottom we have what we have decided to make the dog to look like, or a particular dog. Now imagine if you were a dog and your DNA tells you that you're 99.9% the same as that marvelous creature at the top. And you go over to the mirror. Oh my God. And there's a chihuahua. How are you going to feel? We must have a look at some of the delusions of the dog and understand how are you going to feel. You know, we will, of course, rationalize that the dog is beloved of us. The dog is our devoted best friend. It is noted for its fidelity and its devotion. Yes, yes, it is. Are we? Are we collectively noted for our devotion and our fidelity? No. And what we have done to the dog has, of course, created changes. So first of all, Hecate. Hecate, goddess of the underworld, this is a remedy that is able to go into the abyss. And we need to go into the abyss. When we speak of the beast principle, and in 2017, we can speak of the beast principle without being romantic and off the map. Manchester happened this week. You see? Things have been happening since 2001, 2002, wasn't it? Things have escalated. And we can see that the beast principle, which is a masculine principle, is abroad. And we are facing it across that disc, because even though we may not recognize it in the mild, placid person that we are dealing with, those principles are present not only in the Middle East, not only in people derived from certain races, it's within all of us. All of us. And it's within the patient before you. And that is an area that we need to enter into. What has given us very often the privilege of doing so is that hay fever, that eczema, that illness, that headache that brings the patient to you. And it is fine work to concentrate on that and to bring that person relief. But is that why you are sat behind your desk with this knowledge of homeopathy? Is that what you're really schooling yourself for? Those things are important. They're vitally important. Because you're honouring what the patient has brought to you. And also it holds them and gives you the opportunity to do deeper things. But the real work is the healing of that soul. Is to take the treatment onto a very much deeper level. Is it not on? Hello? Sorry. Yes. Like an ice cream cone. Sorry. Can you hear me now well?
Yes.
Okay. Let me wet my whistle as well. Right. So the purpose of homeopathy, the highest purpose that we have, is the healing of the soul principle, and to bring sovereignty to the soul. To do that, we have to overcome the ego self. The ego self particularly is prone to repress its emotions. It hides, it dodges. It is a slippery customer. And it puts all those things that it rejects about itself, that it disowns, the things that it cannot process, the things that it cannot resolve, the things that it does not even realize about itself, into what we call the shadow. The emptying of the shadow is the highest part of Hering's law of cure, from within outwards, from below, in this case, outwards. Hecate is the goddess who is involved in that. Secondly, another god, Mercury. Mercury is always accompanied by dogs who assist Mercury in the work that he does. And who is he? He's the messenger god. He is the god who conveys the wishes of the Olympians to mankind. Right. Think outside of the context of Greek mythology. Think of this as analytical psychology. What we mean by that. When we have dreams, so often those dreams convey a message. They come to us in parable form, which need then to be understood and unraveled. They come synchronistically. They come at the time we most need them. And most beautifully, in homeopathic technique, you can bring out dreams more forcefully and enable yourself to unravel them and to take that patient into a deeper process of healing. So Mercury. Dogs, Mercury, Mercurius, Mercury, our Mercury. How closely related it is to Lac-canninum. Lac-canninum was first brought to the attention of the doctors of old by Dioscorides and Pliny. And they said that the dog milk was excellent for removing the dead fetus, for getting the dead fetus to be aborted. And in fact, we would not use it, we would not risk using it in that way. We would rely upon our obstetricians, gynecologists to assist us in this. But that is a function of Lac-canninum, that it can bring about abortion. Secondly, that it was wonderfully good for erosions of the cervix, for ulceration of the cervix, in cancer of the uterus. Again, very important knowledge for us. Very feminine in its effect. very strong feminine influence. Dr. Reisig in the USA, in New York, utilized it for the first time in more modern era for the treatment of diphtheria. And here it proved remarkably useful. Now we know that our major remedy for diphtheria is Merck cyanotus. There is a connection between mercury and Lac-can, and we see that linked through mythology, in fact, that is already given to us as a fact. The third divinity involved with gods is Artemis. Artemis, you will probably know as Diana, the huntress. And the huntress is the sister of Apollo. In other words, she is Argentum. She's goddess of the moon, the maiden phase of the moon, and her metal is silver, as Apollo's metal is gold. Here you're seeing remedies which are coming into a relationship with the dog, and which are very useful to know. Gold is right-sided. Argentum is left-sided. So, left, right. Carcinosin, Lac-can, aurum, Argentum. The relationship's very, very clear. And the last and very important god who is involved with dogs is Asclepius. And Asclepius had his sanctuary at Epidaurus, very close to Athens. And there, the ancients would bring their children, as we would to Lourdes in France, for healing. The priests and priestesses at the sanctuary used dogs and snakes to bring about healing. They would pass the snake over the area that was affected. They would utilize dog's blood, dog's urine, dog's bile, and dog's milk for curative purposes. You see a link here between lachesis and Lac-can. Is this borne out in our practice of homeopathy, that there is a strong connection between these two? And do we find that Lac-can is more inclined than most other remedies to dream about snakes? Yes. And do snakes have phallic symbolism and phallic significance? And is Lac-can one of our most important remedies for rape and abuse and molestation? And is carcinosin the nosode which is most inclined to help those patients if you need nosodal support? What I'm wanting to do here is to point out to you these connections. They are hugely important to us, they are hugely useful to us. Knowledge of your wonderful Irish mythology, knowledge of Egyptian mythology, knowledge of Norse mythology, especially if you're dealing with the wolf. You need to know Norse mythology. When you know that Odin is sacred to Odin, and the raven is sacred to Odin, and Odin is the wanderer, the one who went over the world looking for wisdom. You see? And the dog comes from that same strain. This is a hugely deep acting remedy. Very important indeed. Now, if we think of the dog, we would imagine, I would think, that when we do a proving on it, but out of that proving we were going to get indications of this fidelity, this devotion, this vigilant protectiveness, which is so characteristic of the dog, isn't it? Vigilance, protectiveness. And what I would say is so outstanding, in a sense tragic, is their ability to forgive and to love despite all. The unconditional love and forgiveness which is intrinsic to the dog nature. But what transmits rabies more than any other animal on this planet? The wolf certainly started it all, the ball rolling, but the animal that now is the main vector of rabies is the dog. Rabies is made up of two extremes, furious rabies and dumb rabies, or paralytic rabies. the excitation phase followed by the paralytic phase. The greater the excitation phase, the more sure you can be that death will follow. In some cases, the phase of paralysis, the done phase, is predominant, and some cases survive, but rarely. It is deadly. What comes out of the woodwork when rabies commences in that animal's behavior? What do we see?
Madness.
It salivates, yes, it salivates profusely. But even before that starts, a strange change in behavior. When you find a wild animal which is normally scared of humans approaching a campfire, and it is quite contrary to the animal's natural wild behavior, beware, because that would be one of the indications of rabies. An animal which seems to be friendly and then savages you. Does this not reflect certain human behavior? And don't you see a very marked duplicity in this? There's a huge duplicity, a stealth. The person who inveigles his way into your confidence and then takes you apart. And that rabies is so connected. Lysin is the nose. We've got to, whenever you study Lac-can, you have your lysin notes out beside you. You note how it has these horrible episodic attacks of violence. How many of our husbands have that? Think throughout Ireland. I'm not speaking about us here, but think how many men are capable of this, particularly, especially if alcohol is added to the equation. And what happens immediately after the violent outbreak, when things are said and done which can never ever be forgotten? I'm so sorry. It will never happen again. Immediate regret and remorse. And do we believe him? Oh yes, we're going to change him. Another year of marriage to this brute, and another year of misery. Some of us learn quickly, yes, but others don't. And that's lysin. This is an important aspect of homeopathy. Study remedies in tandem. Do not see them ever as islands, as discrete. They flow into one another. It's a family. There are themes. There are things which are holding them together. To me, you could not study Lac-can without studying lysin at the same time. The two belong together. And of course, Lac-lupinum must be one that you would add to it. And as you can see already, we've got mercury, we've got aurum, we've got argentum. And we can place them with confidence into a picture that is emerging, and we can at the top place carcinosum, Lac-can, aurum, argentum, left, right, lachesis, left, underneath argentum. On the other side, who do we need there? Lycopodium. Lycopodium. What is his name? Wolf's foot. Right, wolf's foot. What is that name dependent on? A little characteristic of a leaf, which both colloquially and scientifically has led to it being called Lycopodium. Seemingly arbitrary. A little insignificant characteristic that was given a name to it. But if you hear that wolf whistle, would you be surprised to hear that it was Lycopodium who had uttered it? That misogynist chap who you go back home to, who, after having alcohol, is violently, savagely jealous. And are you surprised then to know that calcium carbonate, calcarb, has that same symptom? And what is calcarb the acute of, the chronic of? Belladonna and stramonium and hyoscyamus. And what are the remedies for this rabid individual? Belladonna and hyoscyamus and stramonium. Aha! Do you see the connections? These connections are so important. These remedies are at the heart of our homeopathy. Kerberos, Kerberos guards the deep unconscious. In other words, to us, homeopathically, the dog guards the entry into the shadow. He salivates like a rabid dog. The saliva drops to the turf, and how did the ancients see the reaction that came from that? As it fell onto the green grass on the side of the river Styx, where Kerberos paces up and down, hoping that we're going to try and come down there before our time so he can savage us. You need Mercury with you, you need Hecate there. You die on your time, correctly, and escorted correctly. You don't try and crash heaven, like Autumn does. From his saliva springs a beautiful purple flower with a sepal which is actually a hood over the rest of the flower. It has bilateral symmetry, like an animal. I'm bilaterally symmetrical. I'm not symmetrical all the way around, circumferentially. And that is just what aconite is. And it has this hood, and it's called Mud's hood. And what did Hades wear? A helm of invisibility. And he is god of the underworld. And Hades comes, at least Cerberus, it salivates like a rabid dog, and from that comes aconite. The very first remedy of our materia medica for existential fear. For fear of annihilation at birth. And the second remedy for annihilation at birth is stramonium, which is a remedy for rabies. And saliva drips from Kerberos's mouth to the earth, and aconite springs to life. How did the ancients know these incredible truths? The beauty of homeopathic science is that we have a means to penetrate these secrets. And what is originally folklore and myth, we bring it out into reality, that these things are real. In studying your homeopathic remedy, this is the perspective I urge you to adopt. The esoteric viewing of it. And to see the relationships, that you're looking at a tapestry. And there's no part of that tapestry that is in any way separate. They're all held together by law. And it is through the homeopathic remedy that you can penetrate and lift these things out from reality, which stands behind, into our lesser reality, that we can better understand it and utilize it. So those four gods, the fourth one was Asclepius, and here the use of Lachesis, or the snake, can be nausea, and the dog, and the dreams that emerge from that. And then we do the provings, and we find instead of, we do certainly, the Lac-can individual has fidelity, devotion, unconditional love, unconditional forgiveness. Just like Aurum has, at its highest point, a vision of life which is spiritual, a golden individual, just as we put a golden halo around our mythical figures of saints. Again, we see that as an understanding that the aura is blessed with this beautiful gold effulgence when it is sacred and when it is pure. That's Aurum at its best. That's Aurum in the light. You look at an ingot of gold. It's warm, it's radiant, it's rich, it's deep. It's got all of that. Switch out the lights and go to that ingot of gold. And what do you feel? Heavy, cold, hard, ponderous, death, depression, an abyss. You see, at the other extreme, there's radiance of Apollo, the sun, Phoebus Apollo. Yes. Can't hear me. So sorry. I'm used to a lapel mic. I'm not so good with this. Okay, Elvis Presley it will be. I just let me get my hair right? Is that better? Yes. Not intentional, I promise you. Right. Now, where were we? Yes. We give this remedy to trialists. They don't know what they're taking, and we get other symptoms coming out of the woodwork. And the one that stands out is, for me, is this one. I wake at daybreak, and I feel that I am a horrible, loathsome mass of disease. I cannot bear to look at any part of my body, not even my hands, as it intensifies the feeling of disgust and contempt for myself. I cannot bear to let one finger touch another. I feel that if I could not escape from this body, I will go crazy. You know that saying from Lac-can. It tells us an immense amount about the entire remedy, something we must understand. It's huge. So that is the feeling that Lac-can has at its most low. There are two remedies that stand out longing for death. What are those remedies? You know aurum? Put Lac-can right next to it. Is there another remedy that approximates to that? Staphysagria, also a longing for death. Aurum, as you will know, will court death. It will court death. It will drive fast. It will flirt with the angels. And Staphysagria does likewise. There's loathing of life, a huge factor with our Lac-can, the loathing of life. So we find that there is this terrible feeling of being stained, of being contaminated, of being poisoned, of being wicked, of being stained. Think of those words. And a feeling of self-repugnance. I'm trying to remember a particular person's name. Temple, do you know the animal behaviorist and autistic? Yes. And what she said was that she felt an alien in human society when she was much younger, and she had incredible tactile defensiveness. And she could not bear fingers to touch one another. So we realized that Lac-can must be a very important remedy for tactile defensiveness. And tactile defensiveness is one of the major symptoms of the autistic person. So there, from that symptom, that picture that we're given of that loathsome mass of disease, you've already got an insight into clinical uses of the remedy and how it stands out. And the moving in and out of incarnation. You're not incarnated properly. You're not completely committed to being in the body. This wavering, this sweeping from side to side must be seen on all dimensions, between the conscious and the unconscious, across the board, symptomatically and clinically, from one side to the other, yes, but also in and out of life. Incarnating, disassociating, depersonalizing, chronically and acutely, in and out of contact with life. And all to be seen cannot bear this contact. Now, if we have a look at the actual picture of Lac-can, it's a milk product. This will immediately give to us, right up at the top, therefore, love is important and mother love must be vitally important. And where that has been lost and never been achieved, that will give rise to a lot of the symptomatology that we are going to see emerging from Lac-can. Lack of maternal love, lack of bonding with mother. That is across the board for the Lac remedies. But how much more so in a pulsatilla type of person? And what would you call a pulsatilla that wants to sit on your lap all the time, wants to cling to you constantly, looks adoringly up into your eyes? Oh, my Mummy, love me. I'll be anything that you want me to be. Just love me. Isn't that a dog talking? Isn't that Lac-can? Isn't that a lap dog? And the dog that bites the hand that feeds it? Chamomilla. So again, now we have carcinosum. We have aurum, we have argentum. We have lycopodium, we have laxus. We have pulsatilla and chamomilla. Pulsatilla to the left side, and chamomilla to the right side, the masculine. At the bottom, as we go down and down into the abyss, the feminine falls away more and more and more, until at the base, where we have lysine, you've got the masculine principle, the predatory, rabid, dangerous, violent beast principle that is present in all. Depending on, of course, the degree of soul, ego, self-balance, it is in control, partially in control, or out of control. Right, so there we've got also a connection between these remedies. We've got the pulsatilla within it and the chamomilla. It means that very often when you give pulsatilla, when you give chamomilla, you're moving towards Lac-can or to Lac-lupinum, the remedies that stand behind. When you see that there is pulsatilla, there's sure to be silica behind it. And where there is chamomilla, who stands behind chamomilla? Who is the chronic of chamomilla? You'll be able to hear if I don't. Anybody?
Bicarb.
Absolutely. Spot on. Thank you so much. Magnesium carbonate is the chronic. Now, what does mag carb mean to you? As far as divinities are concerned, Mother Nature. Right? Central core atom, magnesium, of chlorophyll is magnesium. Chlorophyll, Mother Nature. So we see silica. When you think of silica, what is silica? It's a talisman, isn't it? A crystal talisman. In its shape, it is actually following the ascent of the soul towards the perfection of soul, self, divinity. It has that wonderful pyramid which crowns it at the top. Silica, pulsatilla, chamomilla, magnesium carbonate. Oh, beautiful. So here we've got silica on pulsatilla side, mag carb on chamomilla side. I hope this is making sense to you, because it is so important to have this hierarchy, to understand the structure of the materia medica, and to know that you can move confidently. You've got your GPS, you've got your sat-nav to guide you. You've got a directive, you've got a map. You understand the territory. That will help immensely. It's a milk. Therefore, we know that it has all the electrolytes present within it. It has most certainly calcium, it has most certainly potassium, it must have sodium, and it must have magnesium. And in addition to that, it has the chlorides, it has the sulfates, it has the phosphates. So all of those salts must be present within milk. When you take water from a stream, when you take it from spring water, and we'll think of a particular spring water, what do we find in that water? Many minerals. Many minerals. Amongst many of them, the same that we find in milk. Is there a spring remedy that you know of that could be put into this particular picture that we're looking at with sense? Sanicula. What do we know about sanicula? How does it behave? Either pulsatilla or chamomilla. Hey? You try and pick up a sanicula child when it's crossed, and it will go rigid on you. It goes rigid. A real chamomilla sina type of reaction. And sanicula is made up of many different substances that give to it its picture. What is a remedy that has a similar picture to sanicula that stands out as an animal remedy, particularly for the developing animal mind? And we were there once. And all that pertains to, and the symptoms that go with it. Sanicula, afraid of falling, afraid of loud sounds, borax. Ah, another sodium salt, borax. Afraid of thunder. Is our dog afraid of thunder? You bet. Is he afraid? Are you worried about your dog when you have Guy Fawkes Day, if you still have it? Mm-hmm. Is it awful for them? Of course it is terrible. It's terrorizing. It is very, very frightening and scary. Lac-can, sanicular borax. Afraid of downward movement, going down an escalator. The Lac-can is petrified to put the foot on the ladder. Your dog wanting to get onto the escalator to go down. If I'm a dog, I'm not wanting to go down that escalator. And the connection, the close connection here between borax, sanicular, and Lac-can. Little factors, little helpful factors, which assist so much. Let's just go a little bit into the symptomatology as we go along, picking up little clues that help us to understand how we may utilize this remedy. Most symptoms, when they're florid in Lac-can, are what we would term humanly as inordinate. Inordinate, over the top, excessive. It is as if we're functioning at an animal level. Now, animals are wonderfully balanced. They have control over their urges and impulses. The dog, less so than other animals. It has moved away from Mother Nature through our interference. The hierarchical observation of aggression and submission, how does it apply to dogs generally? You see in wolves there is an absolute strict adherence to the rituals of dominance and submission, to the rituals of the alpha and the beta animal. If I am an alpha animal, I have preference, I have privileges, and the beta will not attack me aggressively if I exercise those privileges. In other words, a wolf makes a kill, and the alpha pair, the mated pair, have first choice of the best cut. If a beta animal makes a gesture towards stealing a nice bite here or there, there is a collision, but it's all ritualistic. In other words, we bristle, we snarl, we make ourselves look awfully fierce, and then our beta opponent, realizing this, rolls on his back, tail between his legs, he urinates on himself, and he shows to me utterly that he is submissive and compliant and cooperative. Nice, nobody gets hurt. Dogs? Some breeds know no fear and no respect for submission. A bull terrier that really is a very aggressive animal, or can be, towards dogs, can be wonderful with humans, can obviously act outside of those laws. And many dogs are continually in a pulsatile mode, a beta mode. They are so like us. What we have done is, by Frankensteinian type experimentation of selective breeding, we've created an aberrant hybrid which has lost so much of the natural abilities of its origin, its progenitor. Some of them can hardly breathe. Isn't that true? We have reduced the nasal cavity. We've repositioned the bones. We've manipulated the animal. They cannot conceive. The pelvis is too narrow for them to give birth. They don't know how to bring up their cubs. They don't know, in fact, some of them, how to make love anymore. Breeders have to introduce them to the female animal and to show them how to do it, to assist them. Now, we find that parallel with this, diseases have developed amongst the dogs which are parallel with us. They run along with ours, as various and as destructive as we find in human life. And here again, indication that this remedy is one that has a very, very broad effect. There are so many other archetypes embedded in it. These inordinate habits, or these inordinate signs that we see, Notice it in the child who is a Lac-caninem. How does it eat its food? It wolfs its food. It gulps its liquid. It drinks vast amounts of milk, and it drinks them quickly. Inordinate thirst, inordinate cravings and hunger. We speak of canine hunger. We speak of a ravenous hunger. Canine, ravenous, raven, and wolf in actual fact, both eat avidly. And the dog has that also, and the human dog. The more I eat, the more I want to eat. The more I eat, the hungrier I get. Remedy? Lac-caninem, yes. Lac-caninem, yes. Raven, yes. But? Any other? Lycopodium, beautiful. Lycopodium's name?
I didn't say it.
Somebody said Lycopodium, yes. Marvellous, Lycopodium. Wolf's foot. Sina, another one that has that. And Sina and Chamomilla and Senicula belong just like that, together. The dog suppresses its emotions. An animal that can be beaten and kicked and cursed, and cowers and cringes. Think of how an animal, a dog, behaves. And yet, offer it something, offer it just a fraction of love, and it's all over you. Everything is forgiven. There's huge repressed emotions within Lac-caninem. Does that show at the table? Think laterally? Of course it does. Craves salt. What is salt, as my son says? Anything other than unresolved issues. Natrum mur, unresolved issues. When a person craves salt, very often that is an indication of things which have been repressed into the shadow and which are not being processed, but are there, craving for salt. The dog is not grounded. It dissociates. To survive, you have to dissociate. If you are exposed to continual abuse, you survive by dissociation. If you dissociate, you need to ground. The feeling is, I want to ground, I want to connect, I want to be centered. It's awful, this feeling. One of the big fears of Lac-caninem is fear of fainting. It's a unique symptom. You won't find it in any other remedy in that rubric. There are, and there must be, other remedies that deserve to be there, but Lac-caninem is there. Fainting, in other words, losing your contact with life. They had to dissociate so much in life to be able to survive that this animal has a fear of fainting. Craving for salt. And let's go a little bit further with that. A need to be grounded, a need for food which is hot, pungent. You wake up. A nice chili pepper can make you suddenly be grounded. Wolves use that. You'll find it in Lac-caninem. I'll be dealing with that next week. But there is a craving for chilies to act as a grounder. So grounding. Easy way of remembering these things if you understand why they're happening. You don't know, now what does Lac-caninem crave? You know that it eats and drinks like a wolf or a raven, but it craves salt for the very good reason that it's unprocessed and unresolved emotions are there. That's a preservative, salt. And then the grounding factor of the hot, pungent food, mustards, peppers. Somebody is always putting sauces on their food to add garnishing. Not good. You will not find it in the Materia Medica, but it is one of the remedies that craves smoked meats. Again, smoked meats, preserving. What do we preserve with? Smoke, don't we? Smoke from wood. Creosote. And what creosote? Hydrocarbon, petroleum. Go to the rubric. I'm pursued by men with the intent of rape. What remedies are there? Synchros, the snake. Synchros is the representative there. Raven is there, Corvus is there. Lac-lupinum is there. If it's not written up in yours, write it in, because it should be there. But important, creosotum and petroleum, carbons, smoked meats, desire for smoked meats. Creosotum desires smoked meats. Carcinosin desires smoked meats. Carcinosin, creosotum, pursued by men with intent for rape. Think of the remedies that are connected. Apropos of that, Donald Fuberster did a lot of work with Lac-canninum, but more so with carcinosin. And he saw this group of remedies that were intimately related. And it's something worth bearing in mind. Number one, carcinosin itself. Secondly, Lac-canninum. And then, along with that, Bellis perennis and folliculinum. All remedies connected with that abuse. What is the big abuse rubric? Connected with carcinosin, sepia is another remedy in that group, Lac-canninum, folliculinum, Bellis perennis. All of them fall under a very important abuse rubric. What is that abuse rubric? And Lac-canninum must be placed within it. Under the long domination of. And isn't that a situation in domestic life, political life, very often? An entire nation. In South Africa, it was particularly so. Under the long domination of. Nazi Germany, under the long domination of. These things all hang together so perfectly. We realize from this that abuse must be a major etiological factor in Lac-canninum, and it is. The abuse is on a broad scale and also individual and personal. So it is a wonderful remedy for marital unhappiness and for misogynistic, chauvinistic problems within a family. All those conditions which you know could be induced by a nux vomica father, a lycopodium father, somebody who is a dictator within the home, who makes all decisions, who wants to rule the roost, call the shots, these sort of individuals. And where they are disparaging of their children, and there's this little Lac-can boy who's growing up, and he's not receiving love from his mother or his father, he is neglected. And his father can only criticize. When he brings his results to father, and it is an 85%, he wants to know where the other 15% disappeared to. And he will also tell you how well he did, where he got 90%, where you only got 85%. This sort of criticism, this sort of comparison, which is not only odious, but is destructive. This is breaking down the Lac-can. And where there is constant abuse, where there is indiscriminate punishment, no matter what you do. You behave well, you behave badly. You are indiscriminately abused and punished. This made even more difficult for Lac-canninum if on the other side you have an adoring mother who is indiscriminately rewarding you. No matter whether you're good or bad, she loves you and adores you. Where you have this combination of the two. What happens to you if you are beaten, whether you're good or bad, rewarded, whether you're good or bad, and sometimes where you have both together? Moral precepts cease to have any meaning. The consequences of your actions are no more relevant. And therefore, you want instant gratification. And if there is instant gratification with no morality, ultimately what develops on a deep level is guilt and a feeling of self-contempt. And these are the things which develop within the child, the Lac-canninum child. Learned helplessness develops from this. If you're beaten, whether you are good or bad, and if you're beaten at every opportunity, and you have certain tasks to do, it's not going to be a motivation for doing things. You become less and less productive. If you do something, you do it in a desultory fashion. You just touch it, you don't complete it. and you're moving towards torpor and inertia. All of these are characteristics of the abused Lac-canine. The dog, you do it to dogs, you'll find that the dog becomes inert, becomes passive, doesn't move. It just goes into the state of inertia. Within, there's anger. And as we've seen, Lac-canine particularly suppresses its emotions. It represses them, keeps them under lock and key. There's this hostility which builds up, and the hostility is empowered by the abuse. The more the abuse takes place, the greater this resentment and hostility develops. Ultimately, the danger is it will either explode or implode. Implode, you go towards depression, and there's loathing of life, loathing of oneself, and the longing for death. If it explodes, well, we're seeing it happening all the time. There's no doubt that even a whole race can have a sense of humiliation, or being less, or being in some way discriminated against. Seeing maybe the USA as the great offender, and then the build-up of hostility and anger, and then the individual who moves upon that and becomes a destructive force. Lac-canine is one such that can move in that direction. Do realize that. Now, left-right movements. How much time have we? Yeah. So let's start with that. The first one is miasmatic. Left, right, left, right. What is unity? It is dead center. Is unity the reality of existence, or is duality the essence of existence? Are we living in a dualistic or a... It's unified. It's one. So we have this swing from left to right, which is dualistic. And this is one of the problems of the soric miasm, the sense of being two. If you're functioning at soul level, spirit level, all is one. The more you deviate from that, then you have soul and ego self. You've got a duality. The more you have a duality internally, the more you will have a duality externally. And then you have a me and them. And them is dangerous and hostile. So this left, right, it is certainly a hierarchical gesture showing I don't mean any harm. I am harmless, I am cooperative, I am compliant, I'm friendly. But also, taking it a little deeper, it is a sign of Sora. It is that splitting that takes place as we enter into incarnation and as we become aware of being discrete and different from others. It's not a reality, but it is a perception. And because it's a perception at a very early age, it becomes our reality. And we start to structure our reality and our responses to that reality accordingly. And a lot of the grief of Sora stems from that lack of oneness. The sense of being isolated, of being apart, separate, disconnected. Disconnected from our origin, disconnected from one another. And that creates, of course, the beta and the alpha situation, which leads to so much conflict and contests and, of course, problems. Secondly, if we go up to the psychotic miasm, this left, right. Now it becomes a moral issue. Think of anacardium, with an angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. The swing between what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is proper, and what is evil and what is wicked. That is a moral change. And then the swing between other dimensions and this dimension. Psychic problems, clairsentience, clairvoyance, clairaudience, psychic awareness, all come with the psychotic miasm. They're all part of the psychotic miasm. And there is a swing between dimensions which is not always harmonious, which can lead to problems, can lead to influences, clairsentience, suffering other people's ailments. This is so Lac-can, picking up. Are they not so aware, so much more aware than we are of their environment? That they have retained from the wolf. They still have that psychic attunement to dimensions beyond that which we see before us. And that comes with the second phase, psychosis. When we go up to syphilis, what is happening there? What is this left-right? Well, we've got an exaggeration of you and me, and it's becoming more and more hostile, and it's becoming confrontational, and it can become destructive at the syphilitic level. But it is a swing of temperament between grandiosity on the one side and paranoia on the other. Paranoia and grandiosity. Pumping yourself up and then paranoid, surrounded by enemies. That is, of course, taking the sword duality and pumping it up to an even higher level. If you go to TB, what is the duality in TB? What is the swing from left to right in tuberculosis? Any idea? Hypomania and depression. Cyclothymia, bipolarity, manic depressive. Many of the great artists of the Romantic period, many of them were in actual fact bipolar. And their brilliance, their genius, was connected to that bipolar tendency. Paganini is an example of that, the great violinist, the virtuoso. He had bipolar condition and the swing. So that's number one. Number two is the hierarchical. How are we going to see that in our Lac-can individual? You'll see it in Lycopodium too, you'll see it in Thuya, you'll see it in Anacardium. The child, oh, your son, Mrs. So-and-so, what a delight to have him in class. A first-rate child. Really, we have no problems with him. And mother goes home. Little bastard. Right. And your husband, he is such a gentleman. It is a privilege and honor to work for him. You know, a more generous and gracious man I have not met. Walks in at home, kicks the cat, kicks the dog, never says a word to the wife. An absolute bastard. Right. In other words, at school, beta mode. Right? At home, alpha mode. At work, alpha mode and compensated beta mode at home. Beastly, nasty. You see the swing between the two. And there you're seeing also that essential element in Lac-can, the swing between Camomilla and Pulsatilla. See it right down at rock face. You see, when you're studying homeopathy, you must begin with your building blocks. We know carcinosin's up at the top at our aurum and argentum. But down here at the bottom, I've got to have my Camomilla and my Pulsatilla. And see them as the juvenile archetypal form characteristic of all. Then